Good evening. I'd like to call to order the July 31st, 2023 meeting of the City of West Palm Beach Historic Preservation Board. Can we please begin with a roll call?
Trent Swift. David Burke.
Here.
James Murphy.
Here.
Amanda Skyer.
Here.
Kristen Kellogg.
Here.
Dan Pickney. Let the record reflect that Mr. Pickney has
There he is.
just walked in.
Just walked in.
Todd McLean.
Here.
Thank you. We now move on to approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do you have any changes to the agenda as presented? Okay. No, none from staff, any from members of the board? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes for tonight's agenda.
A second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We now move on to approval of the minutes from two meetings, the June 27th meeting and the July 13th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review?
Yes. Motion to approve.
Yes. Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes approved. We now move on to the report of the Historic Preservation Planner.
Good evening, Frederique Mettner, City Historic Preservation Planner. Since your last meeting, staff has had 147 Level 1 reviews. We also today launched our EPL software, so again, appreciate everyone's patience as we transition into new plan review and building permits. And this evening, we're very excited to introduce you to the final product of the Northwest Neighborhood Preservation Plan. And to introduce that, Chris Rug, the CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency Director, is here. And then after him, I will introduce Dr. Alicia Wynn.
You have the plan.
And yes, we have the plan that we will pull up.
Yes.
The intro or the survey one? This
Just
one.
the image, I just wanted to be able to,
This one, yeah.
I think that image is really cool. Good evening, members of the Historic Planning Board. My name is Christopher Rug. I am the Executive Director of the Community Redevelopment Agency, and wanted to just kind of take an opportunity to just say a few words before you hear from Frederique and Dr. Wynn, who put really the lion's share, and then of course a special thanks to PDP, the consultant that helped put this together. So this plan, when was originally developed when I first came on as executive director, and when I took over, I realized that a lot of times we didn't have really a good handle on sort of our approach to historic preservation from a CRA perspective. So went to Frederique and asked her sort of what her thoughts might be, and she's was all in favor of a plan, and I love great planning, because then ultimately we know where we're going when it comes to the projects and programs that we're doing from the CRA's perspective. So we embarked on this plan, which was really, really thorough, and I was really happy with it. It involved just a tremendous amount of community engagement, and while so many times we focus on the architecture, the other part that I was really excited about is that it also emphasized the people that live in the community and that sort of have the history and knowledge of what's happened in the historic Northwest for a really long time, and sort of matched those two. So when you hear from Dr. Alicia Wynn, she really does bring that anthropological approach to things, which I found was a unique approach, and we were very thankful about it. Please know that this plan is not going to sit on a shelf. If you may recall, I try to stay true to the commitments that the CRA makes. When I last spoke with you all, it was under some concerns about sort of the nature of historic projects in the historic Northwest. And this is just kind of a symbol that, we'll continue to have a dialogue with the Historic Planning Board moving forward, because we are committed to historic preservation. And this, I think, plan represents that. And while we may not bat 1,000 all the times, we're going to continue to at least have a really clear plan and effort moving forward. So we've got a lot of great, exciting projects that are going to move forward. And with this plan, our intention is that it's going to be baked into our work plan beginning this year. So every year we adopt a strategic finance plan that is very clear and intentional, and that as part of the resolution that adopts that plan, this will be part of that as well. So every year as we start setting budgets for our work, this will be referenced as what are we doing next. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to stick around for a little bit in case you have any questions that I may be able to answer, but I'm sure Frederic and Alicia, most of the questions will be centered around her. But thank you all for the opportunity to sort of share this with you because we're really excited about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what led to the conversation that Chris was alluding to was thanks to the actions of the board when we brought a case in front of the board. So traditionally we have our historic districts, which of course identify properties as contributing or non-contributing, but there has been so much loss of the built environment in the Northwest neighborhood, but still so much cultural significance, and also buildings that may be non-contributing, but important for other reasons. And just like we've been able to designate buildings for other areas of significance, we are starting to identify places of importance that, again, maybe aren't the more traditional preservation route in terms of high style of architecture, but again, have significance to the community. So thanks to the CRA for putting funding forth and making it a priority of identifying these sites and hiring a national firm, an award-winning firm, PDP Architecture. They've done design guidelines for New Orleans, St. Augustine, all over the country, a really great architecture firm and preservation-minded architecture firm. And they worked on this plan and helped guide the neighborhood with Dr. Alicia Wynn's assistant, she's an applied cultural anthropologist. She's a consultant with the CRA. She's also a professor at Palm Beach Atlantic University in helping the community select sites to commemorate and commemorate them in different ways. Some perhaps as reconstruction, some as rehabilitation, some perhaps just as markers. So there's different ways, and that's when Chris was saying they're going to actually be applying funding towards these initiatives, which is exciting. So there'll be different preservation methodologies that will be utilized, and there'll be an actual action plan of putting those into place. And since that's really been our only funding mechanism for preservation in the city, it's very exciting that it happens in the Northwest neighborhood. And I believe Dr. Wynn is going to walk through some examples of what the stakeholders in the neighborhood identified as important sites to kind of give you a flavor of you have the entire document in your packet, but some of the sites, the historical information, and what was identified, and then also some recommendations of how they can be commemorated. Is this the document? Yeah, and then you can just do yeah, you can kind of go through it. Does this one work for you? Or you want the other one?
Can do the PowerPoint. Oh, this is fine. This is fine. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Frederic. Good evening, board. Thank you all for having me. I am Dr. Alicia Wynn. I'm also a historic Northwest resident, and I'm a fifth generation resident of the historic Northwest. So my great-great-grandparents built many of the homes on the 900 block of 8th Street in Tarrant, and my parents grew up in the neighborhood. So I've had the pleasure and the privilege to now live in the historic Northwest for 6 years now. And so this is a personal investment and personal connection that I have in addition to my profession. And so as Frederic mentioned, this is the outcome of a project that has been extensive. I'm going to go up a little bit because the PDP actually put this report together, and my role was to ensure that there are stakeholders at the table. And so the question is, who gets to be at the table? You know, whose input do we listen to and to value? And of course, the first are residents who actually live in the neighborhood. And when you talk about community, it is important to consider which and who are you speaking of. So it could be residents, it could be business owners, it could also be those who are former residents who grew up in the neighborhood, like my parents, but they still consider the historic Northwest their neighborhood. So as they're speaking about my neighborhood, they may not necessarily live in the neighborhood, but they have a connection, a historical connection to the neighborhood, or they may attend worship services or religious institutions within the neighborhood. So it was important to make sure you have those multiple voices. But when you do have multiple voices, and I'm sure from your experiences, you're going to have multiple voices in trying to decide what should be and what should be identified. And so it was a very extensive process. And so this particular project, of course, this is the historic Northwest boundaries, but just even an introduction from the PDP, and this is identifying the hamburger. We call it Hamburger Heaven, but it's actually Hamburger Haven, which is on Tamarind, in which, again, this is a historic site. And so this particular site, for example, it crosses all generations. I remember going to Hamburger Haven. My parents went there after school, and so my grandparents talked about it. And so this was never a challenge of if this should be a site to be recognized, right? And so when you think about those multiple voices and they cross generations, you know for sure that should be recognized. However, as we did about 3 or 4 community engagement meetings, we did first small group meetings with a core group of individuals, which were what I identify former residents of the historic Northwest, or what I would consider our elders. They have a stronger, more definitive voice, and they should definitely be at the table. So it was very important to make sure our elders were at the table to identify that. But then also, what they thought was important, that was historic, that may not be as important to someone who is a modern day or a resident. So, or how do you identify something historic that was once one building and one thing, for instance, for Hamburger Haven, but in then another instance, it's a different business, right? And so we wanted to make sure that there were multiple voices. Of course, there were very many historic homes that were identified, but then the younger generation may not know about that history. They may know about that building from the 80s or the 90s or 2000s, and that's important to them in 2000s. So it was really important to not only when we identified particular buildings, I'm sorry, I'm going the other way, opposite way. When we identify particular buildings, as for instance, this building, which is now will be the Fantasy Island, a restaurant at the very bottom, that's the modern day, but historically on that third picture is a picture of my parents would talk about that was a record store, and so making sure we tell both historical, brackets and time, and so what meanings. And so when we did and put together the report, not only we identified this being a record store, but we also identified this will be the Fantasy Island restaurant as well. And so to capture all of this timeline, to do that, which you will see a very thick report because of that, and identifying historical maps, but then a narrative that comes with it. So we did a trolley tour, and if you can imagine our elders in a trolley going through the historic Northwest, they are reliving their historical childhood experiences and saying, oh, I remember Miss Jones was here. I remember, and imagine us trying to record those stories, but it was important, but it prompted people's memories as well to basically give us a better understanding of the neighborhood. And so from these series of meetings, and we were able to work with the consultants, I actually worked to edit this particular report to make sure we're not forgetting anything. We did give the residents a certain time period to get back with us if something else jarred their memory, something that they thought was important. But then the next step is, how do you present all of this information? How do you present these historical spaces? And some of the spaces, it was just an empty lot, but someone had a full story about that lot. So how do we recreate what was there, whether it was through plaques or some type of exhibit. And so that is our next step. So I'm very excited about working again with Chris and Frederic and with you all to see what this end result would look like after now we have this great report and we have these great, beautiful pictures that were captured, whether it's present and past, and what's the next step. So I'm really looking forward to it. And Frederic and I, we talked about even bringing this back to the community because a report, no one's going to listen to, a 50-page report in the community, but how can we make this a summarized type of presentation and a visual presentation to even prompt people's, thoughts about what we would like to see presented as far as something historical. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, because I don't want to take up too much of your time as you review the report or you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear the methodology and how you went about creating the report. It's very thorough, and I'm so thrilled that the CRA hired such a reputable firm, a nationwide firm, and then, obviously you were invaluable to the process to have someone who has such strong ties to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions from the board?
No, I enjoyed the report. My mother grew up in Northwood. My family's been in Florida since 1790. And so I've heard all the stories that you were just describing, the old roller skate rink, the old record store, Hamburger Haven, Heaven. So I appreciate and recognize the work that went into the report that we've already received, and I appreciated it very much. Thank you for the work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. The report was awesome, and I think it's exciting to hear about kind of heritage preservation, as I like to call it. It's not often, when you're in the world of design and architecture, it's easy to go to the bricks and mortars and talk about architectural styles and is a characteristic of the time, and sometimes the fancier homes or residences get most of the attention or acclaim, and it's not really about that when you're talking about a community. It's maybe the nondescript one-story corner shop, and I think that's really awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing the implementation of the
Okay.
plan.
So we'll
thank
be
you.
back then.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to the remarks of the chairperson. So the matters before us this evening are quasi-judicial in nature, which means we base our decisions on competent, substantial evidence that comes before us, and we ask you to please keep that in mind when you speak. For each project, the applicant will have 10 minutes to present. If there is a demolition involved, they will be allotted 15 minutes. After the applicant's presentation, staff will make their presentation, which will be followed by an opportunity for public comment. And public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. After public comment, if there is public comment, the applicant may make a rebuttal. And following that, we will enter into executive session where we will render our decision. To lead into this, we need to let you all know if we've had any conversations outside of this meeting, so we will now declare any ex parte communications.
As to all matters before the board tonight, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit, and I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record, though I will note for case 2337-224 Greenwood Drive, I do live on Greenwood Drive and live on that block, and so I've walked past that house a number of times.
As to the matters on tonight's agenda, I, David Burke, have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit, and I have not received expert opinions. I request that all of these disclosures and all written communications be made a part of the record.
I, James Murphy, as to matter of all items on tonight's July Historic Preservation meeting. I have not had ex parte communications with the exception of getting a call from Michael Perry regarding HPB file 23-41 and HPB 23-44, 204 Valencia Avenue, asking me if I had any questions on the applications to contact him. I did not have any questions, so I did not contact him. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Amanda Skyer, as to all matters on the agenda, I did speak with Ms. Mittner, and I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation on any of the properties nor made site visits, and I have not received any expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Kristen Kellogg, as to case number 23-37-224 Greenwood Drive, and case number 23-38-303 Buckingham, I have a conflict of interest and have filed the appropriate forms and will not be voting. As to case number 23-41, I have had ex parte communications via a brief phone call with the architect, but can make my decision based on the evidence presented this evening. As to the rest of the cases on tonight's agenda, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Dan Pickney, as a matter of the agenda items this evening, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
I, Todd McLean, as to case number 23-38, 303 Buckingham. I am one of the designers on the project and have a conflict of interest. I will be filing the appropriate forms. As to all other matters on tonight's agenda, I have not had ex parte communications. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit, and I have not received expert opinions. I requested these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Thank you. We now move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. Is there anyone here to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? Now is the time to do so. Yes, yes, sir. So we'll address that. This is for items not listed on the agenda. We now move on to the swearing in of our speakers. So if you are an applicant or plan on speaking, please rise and raise your right hand to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm that the truth that you're giving tonight is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. You may be seated. We have 2 consent cases on tonight's agenda. May I please have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve all consent cases on tonight's agenda.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. If you are case number 23-12A, 310 Valencia Road, or case number 23-37, 224 Greenwood Drive, your case has been approved. Moving on to new business, our first case is case number 23-36, 816 Park Place.
Good evening. My name is Denise Cravey with LCA Architecture. We're here to present a new construction accessory structure located at 816 Park Place in Flamingo Park. We were here back in May to present a project on this site that did not move forward. At that time, suggestions were made by the board regarding the front elevation design. These photos show the historical front elevation and the current existing front elevation after the improvements were made. The improvements that were suggested by the board included reverting the garage door back to its original style and restoring the front door, which is the original front door. This is the site plan depicting the new accessory structure, which is set back over 70 feet from the front property line. 2 new parking spaces and walkways are also being proposed. These are the proposed floor plans, elevations, and a 3D view of the main house and accessory structure. In this slide, we are showing 3 examples of other 1-story homes with 2-story accessory structures that are also located in Flamingo Park. This slide, we are showing a comparison of a similar property with a 1-story home and a 2-story accessory structure. This slide is being shown to convey that in real context, the structure will not overpower the main house. Additionally, we'd like to propose an alternate front elevation which reduces the overall height by roughly 3 feet. This slide is the same comparison as the other one, just showing the alternate elevation, and concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
Question. Can you go back to your, the 2 options? Okay. So I'm looking at these 2 options and comparing them to some of the photos you're showing us. Do you find that these are similar?
They are similar.
How do you feel the fenestration is similar? And do you feel that the fenestration you were showing on this new structure is architecturally correct and significant to the neighborhood in which you plan to build this in?
We do have an image of a house that is 2-story with a large window located at 714 Claremore Road. And we do feel that this is compatible with the other homes and with this home.
Okay, thank you.
Can you go back to that image that you had up?
The last image?
Yes, of the sample house, yes.
Is that a mural or is that a mirror?
Let's see if I can.
I think there's a piece of stained glass on the inside, maybe. I don't know. Is it hanging or is it part of it?
Whoops. Hold on one second.
But it looks like that portion of the house is a 1-story or a 1.5-story element.
There's a glass piece at the bottom and there's a glass piece at the top.
Can you scroll up a little bit on the photo? It's being cropped on our screen. Yes, thank you.
Let me see.
And that was on Ardmore, which is what, 3 or 4 blocks away?
735 Ardmore.
Okay, thank you.
Or sorry, Claremore. We had an Ardmore example.
And that is a 1-story volume.
Did while you were looking at the proposed program that your client gave you, did you explore alternate locations in the rear yard?
This is the location that the client wanted the accessory structure to be located in. So this is what we initially proposed.
Because they desired a street presence?
They wanted more of a presence on the side of the property.
Okay, thank
There's a
you.
lot of vegetation on the site, so it's going to be partially covered by the vegetation. There's some banyan trees and other vegetation that's pretty prominent on the site. And we tried to convey that in the rendering.
What jumps out at me is, from the survey, the large concrete slab in the rear of the property.
That is an existing paver deck area.
Right, which would dramatically decrease the visibility if it was placed literally behind the one-story structure. You acknowledge that?
I
Okay.
believe the client would consider, if this was a condition of approval, to locate this structure more behind the house. I believe he would consider that.
And can you back to your site plan? So I'm just curious how those 2 new parking spots would actually, one, get in those spots without driving all over the front lawn, because you need at least 25 feet behind it to actually make the turn out to the single opening. And I'm also wondering why you just can't add the parking in the same orientation as the parking is to the garage. You could easily make, without making an extra opening, possibly making a wider parking space for 2 cars that are facing north-south
Straight off the
versus
street?
east-west. Well, you could leave the opening, but you could actually, because the code is 10 feet at the sidewalk, so once you go inside that, you can do whatever you need to do. So I just don't think these 2 new parking spaces you could actually use without ruining the landscaping. So I'd like to see a change with that as well.
We are definitely open to changing the parking configuration.
Okay, thank you.
My final question is probably more directed towards staff, but is this going to be a freestanding dwelling unit?
This will be freestanding.
That
And the
explains
intent
it.
from the owner was to keep these separate from the main house.
Yeah, that's clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One other question. So regarding the large fenestration that's on the front, you have the one image from Claremore. Are there any other adjacent properties that have fenestration that are similar in scale to this?
I haven't seen any other properties. We did another elevation that split that window in 2, but we decided to go with the larger window.
And did you ever consider breaking up the mass of that double height facade in any other way?
We have not considered that yet.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. Is this a 2-story structure, or is that room with the large fenestration, is that one big room?
There's a loft.
It's a loft,
If we
okay.
look at this proposed floor plan, there's a loft
I see.
on the 2nd level. And the
Okay.
idea was to bring a lot of light into the space.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ann Hamilton presenting case number 23-36 for new construction of an accessory structure at 816 Park Place. This lot is on the south side of Park Place in the Flamingo Park neighborhood. You may perhaps remember it when it came before the board for alterations and additions. Previously, the applicant did revise those plans and ended up doing the work at a staff level. Just to update you, this is what the site looked like when it came before the board originally, and this is a view of some of the work that the applicant has done so far to restore the building to a more historic appearance. Generally, we're very supportive of the work that's been done here, particularly restoring the front windows and front door. That's something that's very exciting to see. The request is for a new two-story accessory structure of approximately 618 square feet to the rear and west of the existing house. Here's the site plan showing the proposed two-story accessory structure and some of the site work. Here's the floor plan. As previously discussed, it is a two-story with a loft on the second floor. And here are some views of the elevations with that two-story window and covering that matches the existing house. Here are the color elevations and some views of the windows. Here's a view of the existing main house and the new accessory structure, and a color rendering showing a better view with the vegetation on site. We believe that this meets all applicable standards and are recommending approval with the condition that the parking layout is revised to better fit the 3 required parking spots, and staff was also of the opinion that perhaps they weren't usable. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of staff?
I have a couple questions. And looking at the fenestration, and you do compare this to the Secretary Standards 9 and 10, I don't find that this follows 9 at all. The fenestration was, because we talk about this every time when we're here, the fenestration is so different from the main house. So I'm not quite sure how you made the recommendation, so I'd like how you made the comparison.
I mean, generally, we thought that it was similar to the one on Claremore, which is another example in the neighborhood, and the light pattern, it is similar to the existing house, but differentiated by the height. So that was our reasoning.
Okay, thank you.
And can I ask a question along the same lines? So in our additional criteria, we have the proportion of openings, and that's the relationship of the width of windows and doors to height of windows and doors should be compatible with the surrounding buildings. So that surrounding buildings phrase, what is the definition of that? Is that actually like, a few houses adjacent to it, or are you looking at the wider context of the entire neighborhood?
I think generally for things like that, we look at the wider context of the neighborhood, which is why we were, thinking that the Claremore example could be acceptable, but that obviously you can interpret it differently if you'd like to.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. Out of the 2 options, which one did you like and prefer?
I prefer the one with the gabled roof rather than the flat. I think that it is more compatible with the existing house.
Would you consider, if you look at the main house elevation, if you pull up that comparison, if the roof was similar to the center axis of that house, would you accept that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the applicant's zoning legend, and I'm sorry, maybe this should have been directed to them. They have available lot coverage to remaining from this proposal. Am I reading that correctly?
I believe so.
Like 5%? So theoretically, since it's kind of it's a loft, they could likely almost accommodate the entire program as a 1-story structure by my rough calculations, give or take, which may be calming to the double. I certainly am not opposed to the idea of a 2-story accessory structure outright. Well, that's for executive session. I think you answered my question about parking. That parking works zoning-wise, compliance?
Well, I had put the condition in there that we'd prefer actually to see the parking revised because I don't think that it would work in practice.
And if a zoning requirement require each unit to have 1 parking space?
Yeah, well, so the main house would, by code, need 2 spaces, and then the new accessory unit would require an additional space, requiring 3 spaces.
So the driveway or the garage would count as one of those required vehicular storage areas for the 2 requirement.
So the driveway would count for 1, because when the applicant spoke with the board previously, I believe the recommendation was to focus most of the new space on the interior of the house. They did convert the existing garage to living space, so it no longer counts as required parking. Therefore, they are required to replace that one parking spot.
Okay, I'm not going to get hung up on that. I agree with my colleagues up here about the windows. I can't see any surrounding context that would justify that type of window configuration. But thanks. And I think I prefer option 2 with the flat roof over option 3. Not to disagree with you, just as if we're keeping track. Thanks.
Getting back to the parking again, as has been suggested, if the two parking spaces were oriented north and south instead of east and west as they were, would you have to substantially increase the driveway apron there and the curb cut?
I don't believe so, no. I don't think
No?
you'd need an additional curb cut for that.
It'd work?
Maybe just a little bit. I mean, you can have a 10-foot opening, or you can have a 20 in the city. And with this scenario, so that a car could actually stay where the old garage was,
Yeah.
I would design this with a 20-foot opening. And I don't think it would take away from the architectural significance of the driveway configuration and the hardscape. It would also be easier to maneuver, so.
Thank you.
I always thought if there's an existing singular curb cut for one car that had to remain. No?
Nope. As long as you comply with 1 at 10 or up to 20, or 2 at no more than 10 each. So you can't have more than 2 curb cuts, adding up to 20 total.
Let me rephrase. I guess I mean, if the property historically only had space like for one car to drive in and out, you couldn't expand it to have like a 2-car parking situation. No?
We haven't put that into practice. No, I'm not
Okay,
aware
it's
of
just
that.
always something that's been advocated. I'm thinking of like ranch homes that, like have a garage in the
Right.
front. That
No.
it's always,
No, I think a lot of them attempted to do a circular drive, but they couldn't make the math work in terms of the radius, so they ended up with having just the one. But we've allowed them to do 2.
interesting. Okay. Thank you. Any further questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into executive session.
I can start. I can't get behind this proposal at all. I'm actually a little surprised that the primary structure that has so much charm and character and so many elements to cheat from, that such a bland and oversized accessory structure is the result of that. I'm just really surprised because there's so many elements to choose from the scupper to the windows, to the idea of a garage in the back, inverting the idea of a loft, have like the ground floor to be a garage and the living space above it something to justify the second floor nature of it. I see no reason to justify it being 2-story. A loft is extremely out of character for the program. The interior space is extremely out of character with this style of architecture. The window is, I'm not supportive of any part of this application.
I agree, 100%. Those were my exact words. I don't feel this is in character with the existing home. It's not in character with the neighborhood. I don't like either option. I would rather see the applicant come back and have a similar roof line as exists on the main house. I think the fenestration should match the current house. And I would, now that I know that they've gotten rid of the garage, I agree, the downstairs should really be a beautiful garage. So, I can't support this project.
So this project actually reminds me of another two-story accessory structure that we saw somewhat recently. And it was a similar situation where essentially a two-story living space was created, and it made the 1,000 limit for an accessory structure, the mass of the actual building, look much larger than that because of this double height volume in an accessory structure. Yeah, and I feel like the intent of keeping these accessory structures to 1,000 square feet, when you're making these double height volumes that are adding so much volume to the accessory structure, that's, in my mind, that's not really the intent of the code there. So I would say that this proposal follows suit, and that the mass of it is really too large, that it really needs to read more like an 1,000 square foot accessory structure. And I agree about the fenestration. For me, it doesn't meet the proportion of openings in our additional criteria that we are, additional criteria that we're to judge these projects by. So for those reasons, I'm in agreement with my peers.
I was intrigued by your comment about it being a one-story accessory, that there was enough lot coverage to achieve that.
Yeah, there's plenty for them to not do a two-story. If they're looking for square footage, they could go beyond this structure to the rear setback. It might even be a nicer design for the owners if the architect could present it that way. Because I kind of imagine, they have this weird configuration of parking, which I think I would like them to change. Actually, I'd like them to change it so that it's functional, but they have the pedestrian path back to this structure. So I assume this is maybe a VRBO or something, but I can't because, we're not here to assume what the usage is going to be. But I think this would look better as a one-story structure, and they add the square footage that they're looking for to the south side of this addition, and I think it would meet all of our standards.
I do agree that the parking configuration is concerning, like that it would detract.
It wouldn't even work.
Yeah. So what direction do we want to give the applicant?
I think just with our feedback to come back and defer this to a month or two would be my recommendation. I don't think this is a staff. We would have so many conditions on this that I think I would be more comfortable with coming back.
I was actually thinking of a different D word from deferral, only because I just think that the application as presented is so, it's a complete restart is what I think.
So just deny. I would support a denial.
Let me just interject. If we deny a project, is it the 1-year resubmittal?
If they redesign the project, they could come back prior to a year. However, in terms of application fee and getting them back on an agenda a little quicker, I think out of respect to how much the applicant has done on the primary structure, if the board could find a way to continue it with the guidance, I think that would be appreciated.
I mean, from the architect's presentation, it seems like the owner is amenable to, making modifications based on our feedback. And I think we've already shown that he or she is working in good faith with the work that they've done to the primary structure. It looks so much better. It's actually really exciting.
Yeah, it is actually.
And it's like a motivation to make sure that this accessory structure is done correctly. So I'd like to see it continued, but I think that we should give very clear direction on if we want it to be in
I'll
a
make a
different
list. So
location
one
on the
would be
site, or
parking needs to be reconfigured.
So I think the first thing is, are you happy with the location, or do you want to see it somewhere else on the site?
It would be, if they're going to keep it as a two-story, I would like the mass taken down a little bit like we did on Florida Avenue, where they had more, where we didn't allow the loft because that just doesn't follow our program. So I would want them to restudy the massing and the fenestration.
I agree that the massing and fenestration has to be restudied. The massing really has to be broken up or broken down. So I think that there's more than one way to solve for that, but it needs to retain the, I'd say the rhythm of the primary structure. So it's not just this, two-story block of volume. I'm actually okay with it in the current location if the massing and fenestration are addressed. I mean, it is pushed very far back from the street, and I understand in terms of, maybe how you would have historically experienced the property, whatever is happening in the primary residence, being able to look back and not see a two-story structure right there. And, if this would have been done at an earlier period, that it probably would have been positioned that way. So again, I'm okay with generally where it is if you address the fenestration and massing, which really, there's a lot of work to be done there.
And I would love to see a landscape plan just to see how we're going to see this mass from the right of way.
Okay, I don't think we have any purview.
I know, but it would just be nice.
Yeah,
The architects here listening, so.
Yeah, I mean, if it's required for permitting for this project, a landscape plan, is it, Ms. Mittner?
It probably will be
The
based
tree
on
count.
the value of the permit, but obviously they would probably develop that a little bit later, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I do think that landscape would go along.
And how do we handle the
Proposal.
hardscape? Because we've been discussing that a bunch of times in this meeting, and I think we still have the same purview over hardscape as we do landscape. So,
I think that was based on how the code was written. I think there was a differentiation that was determined in
Okay.
terms of you do have more purview over the hardscape, especially the use of excessive hardscape was the concern.
okay, so I would like to see them look at that, restudy that, and possibly just follow code. It kind of gives you the way of doing it, so. Do we need to make a motion with all these recommendations, or?
just
is
a
this-
motion to continue. Do we want to comment on the roof line, whether it's a parapet or a gable? Or I guess, wait and see how
Yeah.
the massing all fleshes out and,
I think wait and see, but I like the example of what the main house gives us now. And out of the two options, I prefer the parapet.
okay.
I'm sorry, just one thing. In terms of location of the accessory building, which side is preferable, to do it on the side or to do it in the back, as was mentioned earlier?
I don't know, I'm with Christian on the location. It's
Yeah, it would just seem
because of the
that,
massing, because it's so front forward. If the massing was changed, it would feel as though it's set a little further back.
okay, because, looking to see where that concrete slab was, a two-story structure would be looming over the primary structure.
Agreed.
Okay, any further direction we'd like to give the applicant?
I'd like to make a motion to defer to the August, I don't know what the date is. 22nd meeting?
Okay,
Or do you need a little bit more time? Is that acceptable, or would you like 2-month deferral? Month is good.
okay,
okay.
do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Our next case is 23-39, 3017 Vincent Road.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Russell Rosicki, architect, representing the interest of Holly Ross, who's here with us tonight. I'll just start by stating some facts about the home and property and what we're proposing. The existing home is 1,612 square feet. The existing garage is 371 square feet. The existing guest house is 343 square feet. It's detached. Oh, well, it's attached, but essentially when the home was originally built, it was detached. The existing home is a 3-bed, 3-bathroom. As proposed, we're doing a design to make it 4-bed, 3.5-bathroom for the main home at a total square foot proposed of 3,433 square feet. The tallest parapet as we're proposing in this design for the second story is 24 feet 10 inches. It steps down to the lowest second floor parapet proposed at 23 feet 2 inches. The setback to our second story proposed addition is 35 feet 7 inches from the front lot line. It's 12 feet 5 inches from the front front facade. So the second story addition we're proposing equates to 1,167 square feet. We're proposing for a net reduction in building footprint of 66 square feet, bringing the home into compliance with green design standards as proposed here. I'll just zoom into this plot plan real quick. The home is a 1924 mission style single story. What's unique to me, being an architect, also having studied architectural engineering, is the fact that the home is not balloon framed. It's actually platform framed. It has a very nice concrete formed stem wall over a concrete formed spread footer, which is unusual for a home of this age. Perhaps it was replaced at some early time, but it is definitely aged. It's a good quality foundation to build above with. In our structural design, we would accommodate pad footing foundations at select locations where we have a lead-in beam that carries second story loads down to column points over pad footers without interrupting or blowing out existing foundations. The new pad footers would be located below the existing spread footer. You just do a little further excavation, form up and around, and you could land upon them. I'll just zoom in here to the proposed plot plan showing the considerable setbacks. A good strategy I like to employ when it comes to mission or Mediterranean revival homes like this, being mission, is to sawtooth a proposed addition, considerably keep it set back from the front and primary facade to distinguish the new addition from the existing construction. Also trying to keep proportions in check with parapet height, second floor height, ceiling heights, existing with versus proposed, and so as not to kind of squash the first story with the proposed addition. Our proposed garage in consideration here is a relocated garage. It actually currently, I think it dates back to 1973. It was, in my opinion, haphazardly built. It connected the guest house to the main home. Again, that's not an original construction, although it is marked and colored on the city's map as being a full historical structure. That component is not. I had the luxury of inviting Ann out where we were able to meet and walk the property and look at the home together and at least talk about our proposed addition before we continued with the design. So the proposed relocated garage aligns to the back facade of the home. This property is very unique, and it's the first of its kind for me to have worked with dealing with a double radius lot line. There's a radius at the front lot line. There's a radius at the rear lot line. And the lot actually tapers. Two surveyors that we've gotten surveys from had conflicting information with the radiuses, proving different property lot areas, and definitely differentiating with the city's PAPA's results of property area based on having two radiuses with tapered sides. Long story short, we erred on the side of precaution as far as what we're proposing, still in compliance with the lot size, even at a reduced square footage. We have a small, what I call sliver of an addition proposed to the existing single-story guest house. And this, you'll see in a moment, actually allows us to modify a bathroom so that the kitchen becomes usable. Currently, there's a kitchen there that you walk in and it's kind of 3 feet wide. You have a refrigerator to your back, sink to your front. You can't really open the door while, with any good function there. What I'll also show here is the streetscape elevations. Interestingly enough, on Vincent Road, having walked up and down it, the majority of homes, other than one, are 2-story up and down the street. While that's not always a good indication that what we're proposing should be the same, in this case, it is complementary to the adjacent homes and even homes of similar style in the Mission style directly across the street and just south of this property. So we have our demolition plan. We are planning to demolish that existing garage, which currently attaches the main home. There's a setback between the main home and the existing guest house of 12.6, which was original. We would like to preserve that. Our proposed floor plan is quite complex to achieve this setback second story. We are designing for steel moment frames to land on enlarged pad footers, and those moment frames will be picking up inset second story loads to accomplish this design. We have an open to above section where the stair forms. The demarcation line of that also makes sense for interior planning. We're maintaining that original living room, which is quite small for this home, but with its historic character in place, we'd like to maintain that center line of the fireplace where it is with the 2 original windows, and then our second story occurs beyond that line. The dining room stays within its same parameters or area. Just you have a stair now that accesses up to the second story, so there's that open to below, which could be experienced kind of an above look up. The second floor here gives you a good indication of how that jigsaw or sawtooth shape makes its way and kind of follows consistent with the original home design. The home has has parapets. They're actually barreled and coped. I should say coped with barrel tile. The only roof that actually has a full sloping barrel tile roof is over this front entry portico. The rest of what you're seeing is just a coping over parapets. So you're seeing the comparison of existing versus proposed in this elevation here. That's for the front, and then for the rear, same thing. We tried to keep the consistency with the muntins and lights. The windows will be CGI Sentinel with exterior OG muntins. We'll be choosing the Florida bronze color. And for our doors will be WindGuard aluminum, PGT. They're aluminum extruded, and those will also be Florida bronze color. This is a right side view of the proposed design where you see the existing chimney maintained. We would actually have to decommission this chimney in the sense of it being too close proximity-wise without elevating it upward. It'll probably end up being decommissioned in the sense that it'll be just a vent-free version, meaning it wouldn't be a functional wood-burning fireplace at this time. No combustibles, even though it can still be used as a fireplace. The side view, we have some leaders and downspouts, strategic locations with overflows required by code, coping that matches consistent with the original single story. This is actually the north-facing side of the home. And then you're seeing a small addition being proposed onto that guest house here. This is the south elevation. You're comparing existing versus proposed again. You see that inset second story. These pipe vents, we decided to keep them, but in a non-functional manner because there's no longer a roof at that location. They're moving upward to that second story to be functional. We are proposing awnings over front-facing and rear-facing and south exposure windows for the purposes of all glass being clear, not tinted, not reflected, no low E coating all around the home. So awnings would be required in this sense of heat gain reduction. Here's a good section. There is a crawl space in the home. It's mostly unvented at this time, but we are going to be super insulating the full envelope as it relates to a green design. We are going to be spray foaming the roof, the attic rafters. We're doing longer span joists. We are designing for a very high efficiency SEER mechanical system in the range of 28 SEER and 22 SEER for one of the units, with the guest house also being super efficient. Our fixtures proposed, at least as it relates to green design, it would be low flow water consumption, and we would like the owner to consider having catchment systems for manual irrigation throughout the property. Sometimes we don't have a landscape plan prepared when we are here to present to the board, but Bart Cook, a very good landscape architect, designed what we believe to be a lovely romantic landscape, which kind of makes use of that difference between the main home where the garage is and the guest house, that existing 12'6" setback there, as well as a new pool being proposed centerline with the guest suite. Here's a rendition of the front facade as designed. We have carriage-style doors. They're going to be Pecky Cypress. That's actually the color rendition of what it would be. We are maintaining the original front door, which is gorgeous. We have full-height arch-top windows in place of where they were. Just to give some people a better understanding, we believe somewhere in the range of 1933 that they converted what was a screen room in the front to habitable space. And the owner at that time was a good painter. I actually spoke to one of the family members who sold the home to my client, and he had a picture on the wall, which is a watercolor. I asked him if I could have it. He said, yeah, sure, here it is. And then I kind of noticed what it was, and I thought to myself, well, this wasn't all exactly original at this time because they had already converted that screen room into habitable space, but it still felt like an outdoor room, so to speak. So all of what you're seeing here in this same image is all of what we're proposing to maintain. There are two side windows that do fall within our garage relocation, so to speak. And that's where the dining room is. That's that double window that the mouse cursor is on right now. I realize there might be importance to a board member or two about this subject, and what I'd like to say is, in advance, we would be open to making the garage into a carport, so to speak, to make it more breezy and open, allow diffuse light through, allow those windows to be maintained with the column point coming between the windows supporting that second story above. And then I do have some reference mission-style homes that are directly on the street and in the neighborhood. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the applicant?
I'm working to get back to the elevation, but in the elevations, you're showing an existing first floor ceiling height and then a proposed first floor ceiling height. So are you proposing to change the ceiling height for even the portions that you're keeping on the first floor to raise the ceiling height?
Yes, that is confirmed. And the reason being is the home has an interstitial space. There's the ceiling framing, then there's the roof framing. There's approximately 24 to 30 inches depending upon where the slope is on the flat roof. So we're still keeping that interstitial space. That same roof line stays where it is. Today's flat roof stays where today's flat roof is. But that gives us the luxury of lifting the ceiling without compromising the existing structure. As I mentioned, it's uniquely platform framed. Unlike a balloon frame, which would have a let-in or something that the ceiling joists are landing upon with some historical value, that's not the case in terms of the way the current ceiling framing is there today.
Russell, I'm going to focus on the second floor ceiling height. Do you think that you could make 8-foot high ceilings work on that second floor? I ask because it just, my first glance is that it's slightly oversized, the second floor, and I think because it doesn't have the proportion of being subordinate to the first floor. They're equal.
I completely agree.
Otherwise, I think there's a lot of strong merits in this application, but this second floor is just, it's just off.
I understand. And to be quite frank with you, as the architect, I had originally designed 8-foot. And then where I thought there might have been a bonus at the request of the client, right? Everyone wants these homes with these taller ceiling heights. We can all agree that's natural, right? But I had thought, well, from a street perspective, from the actual personal view, eye level, you're seeing it as the same, even though it has a 9-foot second floor ceiling. On drawings, it may comparably seem large, but when you have a parapet that rises 12 to 18 inches above a flat roof, you're clipping off the height of that second story. So to be fair, that second story does not appear like 9 feet. It actually appears, if it's a 12-inch parapet, more like 8 feet. If it's 18 inches, more like 7'6", of what you're actually realizing. Elevationally on a drawing, it may appear different. But at the interest of the client, the request was made for it to become 9 feet. And while I understand the interest there, obviously we would first request it to be 9 feet. And if that was a contentious issue to the board, we'd consider the reduced height.
And that line of questioning that I had was actually relating to the same subject. So even though you're raising the height now to be 9 feet, the original ceiling height was 8'4". And I feel like you're reading a smaller first floor, even when it's actually built, not just an elevation. I'm an architect, so I know what it's going to look like when it gets built when I'm looking at these drawings. And I still feel like you have to go down to the 8 feet so that your first floor reads like it's more prominent, you know, in terms of height than your second floor. And in addition to that, just the height that you have between the head height of your windows and then your top of parapet, I mean, that's really doing you a disservice. So I think that's going to solve a lot for you by taking it down to the 8 foot instead of the 9 that you're proposing. And then similarly, I think you need to restudy the sizing of your second floor windows. It's, you know, the light pattern I think is very consistent with the house, but the sizing of the second floor windows is again just a little bit overscaled for the proportion of the fenestration that you're seeing on the first floor.
Wonderful comments, thank you.
Very
And
nearly.
as an architect, I can tell that you are speaking my language right now. I had started with a smaller window design until I realized code compliance. For egress windows, for single hung windows, they got to be of a certain minimum size, as you know. Otherwise, we'd be proposing casements with smaller openings that are not respective of this type of home. Casements weren't all that common, especially to a mission in this case. This specific home had single hungs. So if we did scale down the size of the window, you'd be changing the function of the window.
Right, but there's other ways to solve for that. So you have your egress windows on the front facade. I mean, some of the windows that I'm referencing are into a double height stair hall. So that's, we're really focused on the front facade. You don't have any situation where that's your only egress option. So you can change, like for bedroom 202, you can change your egress to the side.
Okay, I would agree. There's probably a juxtaposition that we can do while maintaining code compliance, but switching windows within a room. I'm of the goal of trying to maintain similar window sizes when you're looking at one side of a room versus another, but I can understand your position there. But going back to the wall height, be it as it may, I respect your opinion, but what I can say is the interstitial space plus the ceiling height on the first story equate to less of a height than the proposed second story. So if your position is that the second story wall height or ceiling height as proposed is taller than the first story, that's actually inaccurate in the sense of what we're proposing here.
I'm not following. You're proposing 9 feet for the second floor, correct?
Yes.
And I'm saying that the mass of what's there, even though you're changing the ceiling height, the proportion of your fenestration is scaled for an 8'4". And so it's, even though it's going to be a 9-foot ceiling on the interior, it's still from the street reads like it's
It's
lower
larger.
ceiling height. Yeah.
At first thought, you would think that, but obviously the parapet's height changes and varies across. But, again, if it's the interest of the board that we have a smaller second story height, I'm not going to object to that, and neither will my client. But just in the case, I just like to describe, there's a larger interstitial space with that ceiling. The box trusses are 22 inches as proposed. The existing interstitial space ranges from 24 to 30 inches. The ceilings joists we're proposing are 12 inches, right? So if you compare 24 versus 12, we have a little bit above for a parapet. I mean, you're talking an equivalent wall height on the second story. But if your position is of the second story should read smaller in the sense of comparison to the first story, because that's original historical, I would agree with you in that regard. So, but again, we will accept the smaller ceiling height if the board dictates that.
Any further questions of the applicant? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. Ann Hamilton presenting case number 23-39 for additions and alterations at 3017 Vincent Road. This lot is on Vincent Road in the Prospect Southland Park Historic District. It is currently a one-story mission-style residence, as you can see here. The request is to add a second-story addition and a small addition to the ground floor guest suite. The total additions are approximately 1,117 square feet. This includes the demolition of the garage connecting the current main and accessory structures and construction of a new garage attached to the main house, as well as limited changes to restore the front elevation to a more appropriate historic appearance. This is the site plan. The applicant did a good job of explaining the program in his presentation. These are the existing and proposed ground floor plans. As you can see, the existing garage is going to be demolished and moved forward. However, as I will explain later, it appears from permit records that that garage was not original. This is the proposed second floor plan. This is the proposed elevations. As you can see here, the arches on the front windows and front entryway are going to be restored to their original heights. Doorway that was used for professional office access is going to be infilled. And windows that were changed to casement windows are going to be replaced with single hung, which would be more historically accurate. The applicant is retaining the existing chimney with their new garage addition and is detaching the guest suite from the main house, as you can see here. Here are the south elevations and the rear elevations, the roof plan. As you can see from the green card here, the garage addition was probably made sometime in the 70s, possibly this 1975 permit to enlarge garage and roofing. As you can see on the Sanborn map, they originally were not cited the way that they are in the green card drawing. And based on seeing the garage and the way that the circulation is, there is no interior circulation from the garage to the guest house. It seems that the garage addition was later to attach it to the main house. We believe that it meets the applicable standards and are recommending approval of the application as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Questions of staff? Any questions of staff?
The survey included in the package still shows a connected element that is the garage and the accessory structure in the rear.
So the survey that was in the packet,
Yes.
I believe that's probably the existing conditions, not the proposed.
Right.
Yes, so currently the garage attaches the guest house to the main house.
Do you feel as though it is problematic for the move to bring the garage forward to the street and impact the original ground floor architecture in terms of loss of windows and move it closer to that character defining fireplace?
So I think the loss of the windows is probably the most significant concern I would have. I did appreciate retaining the chimney, and since it was, within the required 10-foot setback for garages, and since the garage was existing, and with the justification of restoring that guest house to being a detached structure, as it would have been historically, I felt it was at least a decent compromise, despite losing some windows that I would like to see retained.
Any further questions of staff? Thank you. Do we have any public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into executive session.
I like this new addition, second story, and the garage. I don't mind losing those two windows, although, because Russell mentioned it, I do like the idea of a carport better in that space. I think it will help define the main structure like it is that we see today. I don't mind the height, but I do see how it could come down a little bit, but not much, like maybe 8 inches if necessary. But I think the architect did a great job. I love the history. I really love the watercolor that he found. So, and I appreciate the staff's work on this. I think they did a great job, and I would follow staff's recommendations.
So I'll stick by my comment that the second floor ceiling height has to come down. I think it will feel really out of balance when it gets built if it doesn't. I'll take 8 inches, but between 8 inches and a foot either, but I would definitely say 8 inches minimum because of the way that fenestration reads. And I would also want a condition that the second story fenestration is restudied so that it's more in scale with the first floor historic opening.
It does seem a little large in the line drawings.
Yeah, it's nearly there, but
Yeah.
it's, to have larger, particularly on the street facade, to have larger fenestration on the second floor is just not what you would typically see in a historic
Right.
residence or characteristic of the properties that are in the immediate vicinity, that are similar in style.
How do you feel about the carport versus garage?
I mean, I think that the carport helps differentiate the old from the new.
Yeah.
And I like that it would help retain, the window or windows in question. I feel like the weight of having a second story mass that's enclosed on top of a carport feels a little bit off for the period,
Yeah.
because typically the carport would be one story.
One story.
So
Agree.
that's what I would prefer for that mass not to be two-story at all, but I know that's probably asking too much.
I completely agree.
Okay.
I'm just worried about the overall program. I feel like a lot of these projects that we're seeing, there's just a lack of restraint. It's like maxing out everything.
Yeah.
Like, not only is the garage moving forward, we're also now putting a second floor on the entire property. There's no one-story element, and it feels like it's just too much. And I think when, we're referring back to the standards and thinking about spatial relationships, not just the property itself, but, of the entire streetscape. And I think, going back to Anne's comment, I think, yes, the accessory structure is being restored back to more what it was in terms of its building footprint, but that's in exchange for sacrificing, like, the primary structure, and I feel like just the names, primary, accessory, should speak to their prominence and how they're prioritized in the project. I have further thoughts, but I'll stop there.
In line with what you mentioned, if you did make that, we'll call it a carport now, the carport portion a single story, it does look like you could economize the way you're using the space on the second floor to still, I know that it's tighter, but to still get closer to that program. There's just a lot of space that's being used for hallways and vestibules and things like that. A very nicely sized master bathroom.
And even our last, standard 10, new additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. I don't know. Again, going back to restraint, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I actually, I was thinking about what will the actual construction process look like? How much of this building will actually remain?
Well, you can take a look at the materials removal plan, and there's a lot of dashed lines on that sheet. So it's essentially completely gutting the interior except for the mantle, and then your exterior shell. And then all the doors and windows are being replaced, and I know we're all familiar with what that entails. So, not a lot.
Would anyone else like to weigh in?
So would you be in favor of the project if that two-story carport was a one-story? The other, the fenestration and the ceiling height were addressed, or do you still feel like it's
A one-story carport or a one-story
one-story
garage?
carport
I think that would balance out the second floor,
in the mass?
yeah. And you'd still, but it would still be pulling it forward.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could actually, I think he offered that as a solution, that then that could allow those windows to be retained.
Mm-hmm.
Would still stay in the same position as he has it designed, just the first floor would be open.
Yes.
Okay.
But you're saying no second floor, right? Are you saying,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I could support that. I can kind of envision that happening.
That makes me feel a lot better about the chimney. The chimney is just like, won't be a working chimney and just kind of lost.
So I'm just writing down 3 conditions. So lowering it 8 to 12 inches, the second story addition. Study the second story addition fenestration to be more in line with and size of the first story. And then change the closed garage to an open carport and keep the current first floor fenestration.
I would say that carport has to be one story.
Yeah, 1 story.
Okay.
Oh, and then, so you would get rid of the upper,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
But I think it's still 3 conditions.
I don't know how I'm gonna word that. You wanna do it?
Yeah, I could do it.
Sure, we'll answer a question, even though we are in executive session.
Would the board be willing to consider that second story at another location, perhaps above what is not original? It's that rear addition to the main home, southwest side of the property, in terms of achieving that same square footage, but putting it way back.
The existing guest suite?
It's not the existing guest suite, it's the southwest side of the property. It's remaining as a single story currently. It's what's referred to as the old dental office, which was original to the original homeowner who was a dentist. That was an addition, it was not original to the home. Putting
I
a second
think your
story
drawings
there.
identify it as existing guest suite, if that's the area that we're talking about. D1.
I think it's the modified bedroom.
It's on sheet A1.
D.
It's relocating the new bedroom to,
Yeah, it's modified bedroom
Modified bedroom.
on the
over,
first story.
yeah, over here,
Yes,
over the existing low slope roof.
Yeah, I would support that.
thank you.
I mean, I don't think I could make that a condition. I could, without seeing it, I don't think we could approve it. If we,
agree.
If
I
we,
think staff could though.
I don't think so.
No?
I wouldn't
I would
feel
want to see
comfortable
it
with
back.
that. So,
So maybe defer with
so
these.
continue it.
Continue it with, and give Russell a few conditions that we'd like to see. I think that's easy.
Well, I think it's still those 3
I do too.
conditions
With the new 4th.
or remarks.
And I mean, I would personally have to withhold, just if he comes back with that, doesn't mean it's definitely
Right.
something I would
Yeah.
support. I just,
You
I
have to see
can't
it.
visualize
I agree.
what that's going to look like.
I'm just looking at his elevations, and I don't think that moving what's over the new proposed garage to that back corner would impact this home.
No, I think it could be a very good,
Yeah, and
very
I
good
like-
strategic move.
And I like removing that second story over the new, which we will call carport. I think that's a really nice change to this design. So maybe defer.
Whereas I was generally not supportive of the idea of removing a bathroom, a bedroom and bathroom from the program. I appreciate the architect wanting to engage even in an executive session and come up with a solution to not lose that program, and it's on an existing one-story element. Ironically, the portion that's furthest from the street.
Right.
So I think that's worth exploring.
I agree.
But I think that we should see it and not put this on
Okay.
the staff.
Yeah, and I would continue to caution restraint with massing.
So can I make a motion to continue this case? Is 1 month enough, Russell? With the comments you've received this evening?
Okay, do we have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Our next case is 23-40, 945 32nd Street.
Good afternoon. My name is Miguel Espinoza. I'm here representing Three Generation Homes. So they're proposing to build a single-family home on this lot, which is currently vacant. I think it's currently actually housing a carport for the adjacent neighbor to the west. As you can see here, we have the front elevation of the home, trying to figure out what the real historic is of this street. I did travel down there and try to see what it was and talk to the people who were doing the plans to try to come up with something that the board could agree with, and Ann as well, and whoever the powers that be can let us build this home here. So I'm gonna just keep scrolling here to take you guys. I got some product information, which I don't really think is that important at the moment, but I'm gonna take you to a survey. So here's a survey of the property. They set the house back 25 feet. We had 11 feet on each side. The house is centrally located on the lot. It's a 50 by 102. Really isn't much that we can do with that. We have a floor plan here for you guys to see as well. It is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a laundry, a kitchen, live-in dining. It's very simple, cut and dry, to the point. Nothing quite as fancy as the 2 previous projects you folks have been looking at. We do have a roof framing plan as well, with a typical wall section of the house, which is going to be a monolithic footer with block CMU units and a bomb beam. Here are the elevations of the house. We have the north, which happens to be the front, south, which is the rear, and our east and west elevations, and our window and door schedules. We did, just in case, I want to make sure that I say this, the 2 front windows, we did went ahead and put muttons on the top sash, as I have seen some of the other historic homes in the area had sashes, and I talked to Ann about it, and she thought that that would be a good idea to throw in there, so we went ahead and put it in there as well. There's a proposed site plan just showing actually where the house is going to go located, which we went through on the survey. The house will be stuccoed. It'll have asphalt shingles, impact glass windows, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing up here, so I'm going to hand it over to you guys. You guys could just hit me with your questions, and I'll go ahead and answer whatever I can.
Are you okay with the staff's conditions of putting the 2 front windows a little closer together?
I think we can do that. I didn't, yeah, of course.
And would you be willing to lower this roof height?
Lower,
Yeah.
as in the pitch lower?
Yeah, to maybe
Okay.
4 and 12?
Sure, that shouldn't be a problem at all.
Because if you look at your, I think there was a streetscape, let me look at mine.
Yeah, there is a streetscape as well,
So
actually.
it just seems a little bit out of scale for the surrounding neighborhoods, and, I mean, it's similar, I'm on Google right now while I'm looking at this, and it is similar in style to everything on the street, but your
Yeah.
roof height is a little higher than everybody else.
That's
So
fine.
maybe that could be an added condition if Ann is okay with that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem lowering it from a 5
And I would
to-
also like to see when you come up to the front door, the left side, you have it completely blocked off. It would be really nice if that was open. You know, I don't know
Okay.
if you're trying to hide the neighbor there or something, but it would
No,
just be nice.
I don't know that there's an
to
actual,
make that nice. It just seems kind of closed off, so.
would you like it as a pass-through open?
Yeah, just, it would be nice, because you have nice side setbacks. It'd be nice for landscaping,
Sure.
make it feel a little more
I'm
inviting.
nothing wrong with that. We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Todd, can you say that last comment again? Were you talking about the entry? The last comment that you made?
Yeah, so
The entry?
right now, when you walk up to the front door, the left side is completely
Closed.
stuccoed off. So I just think it should be open.
I'm good. No problems.
Can we go to the front elevation? So there's really no detailing on that front entry, right? It's just a stucco opening and then it runs down and meets your slab there essentially.
Correct, yeah. It's almost like just an arched opening to a degree.
Would you be willing to work with staff to detail that a little bit more so that the proportion of your detailing is taking into consideration some of the historic precedents?
Sure.
There,
Do you have anything in mind right now, or just working with Ann?
I think it would be best to work with
Sure.
staff, but I think that if you can detail the supports at your front entry, especially considering that you're going to be, if the board votes in that direction, opening it up to the side a little bit more, detailing it so that it reads, there's a lot of historic precedents, but with some of the vernacular that's in the area, so that maybe it reads like a post instead of just a straight stucco return to the ground.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It'll make it prettier.
No problem.
Any further comments for the applicant? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
May we have the staff presentation?
Good evening. Ann Hamilton presenting case number 23-40 for new construction at 945 32nd Street. This is a lot on the north side of 32nd Street in the Northwood Hills Historic District. Previously, it was occupied by this detached carport, which I believe probably went to the house next to it at one point. It was built in 1954, but is considered a non-contributing resource, and so staff supports the demolition of it. As you can see here, these are the existing homes at 951 32nd Street and 941 32nd Street next door, and a better view of the site. The request is for construction of a new single-family residence of approximately 2,200 square feet, as you can see here in the rendering. Here's the proposed site plan. It meets all setbacks. The proposed roof plan, it's proposed to be roofed with a shingle roof. Here's the proposed floor plan as the applicant detailed. The elevations, as I'll detail in the conditions, I had the condition that the 2 front windows shall be paired. All windows need grids, and that the front porch sides are either open or, to echo the house next door at 951, perhaps a breeze block knee wall. Here's the streetscape where you can see the home in relation to its surroundings. The rendering, which you've already seen. We believe this meets the criteria for new construction and are recommending approval with these conditions. All windows shall feature OG muntins, including those on sides and rear, which are currently depicted with no muntins, with the exception of the 2 small bathroom windows. And I guess I should clarify that I'm intending it to have a 6/1 grid pattern. All windows shall have clear glass and white frames with low E coating permissible on side or non-street facing elevations. The 2 single hung windows on the front of the home shall be paired, and the front porch gable roof shall be lowered and the sides of the porch opened with a breeze block or brick knee wall added. Thank you.
And you're okay with just opening the front without a knee wall?
I'm fine with opening it. That had been kind of in an effort to match better to the house next to it, but I'm also fine with open.
Just, okay, without a knee wall or any, okay. Thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, thank you. Do you have any public comment?
Good evening. My name is Gary Griffin. I live directly across from the empty lot. My general concern is that looking at the front elevation of this property, in no disrespect to the builder at all, but it just really lacks character and charm. It doesn't really add any, historic value to the neighborhood. Specifically, the entryway, it just looks odd to me. I'm not a builder, but it looks out of place. I know there was a suggestion of, maybe opening it, but I didn't know if there's the possibility of maybe considering, some sort of knee wall that has like a curved arch at the top. A lot of the other homes in this neighborhood, there is a mixture in that particular section of homes. There's Spanish homes, there's I can't think of the other type of home, but cottage homes, mission-style homes. So there's a lot of different mixtures and even mid-century homes. And I know I'm particularly excited for my neighborhood because of the improvements that are being made and that they are building these new homes, but at the same time, I'm wanting our neighborhood to hold on to the charm, the historic value of the neighborhood. And what I was hoping for the board to consider is just some sort of change to the front of the home to make it look like it fits in. And again, no disrespect to the builder, but this is a home that you would see anywhere else in the city, not necessarily a historic neighborhood that I live in. So that was a little bit kind of off for me. A couple other concerns that I would like the board to consider too is that I noticed on two things. I noticed on the drawing, the driveway. It only has a single car driveway. And this particular neighborhood, it's primarily on-street parking. Most of the historic homes have single driveways. But because of all the cars that are parking on the driveway, would it be appropriate to change that to a double car driveway? Also, for the consideration of it being a 3-bedroom house, there's going to be issues that would arise from having a 3-bedroom house and only having a single driveway. And then lastly, I think the other thing that I noticed, the other young lady that spoke a moment ago had indicated that the house, I guess, is approved or requesting to be approved for over 2,000 square feet. The notice that I received is only approved for, or requesting approval for 1,237 square feet. So a dramatic difference. It's a very small lot. A lot of the homes in that area are cottage homes that are smaller in size. I live in a house that's 850 square feet. Over 2,000 square foot house is going to be dramatically different than what the neighborhood is in line for at the moment. So hopefully I kept that to 3 minutes.
Yes. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We appreciate your participation. Would the applicant like to respond, or if you'd like to have a rebuttal, you're welcome to take one. If there's anything you want to correct or respond to that he said?
Just the square footage is, actually, it was an error on, unfortunately, Ann's part. It's 1,309, the total square footage of the home.
Okay.
Not 2,200. And in regards to the gentleman's concerns, we are willing to do whatever the board wants us to do to try to make everybody happy as best as we can. So whatever Ann, or whatever the decision is, we'll be happy to try to see what we can do to suffice everybody.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll now go into executive session.
I do feel like the massing of the structure is, we keep seeing things that it's a lot of mass that people are proposing, and this massing is consistent with the neighborhood. So I think the massing is where it needs to be, and it's really about getting the details right, whether it's through staff's recommendations or some of the things that we discussed today. I think the massing of that front gabled entry, it works well, it's just the details have to be considered. So if we're making the side open and then adding the pilaster detail and how that pilaster then meets your hardscape, and then, perhaps instead of this, like, I'm not really sure what to call it, but the vent type of stucco detailing above it, maybe that's just siding above your pilaster so that you're referencing some of these historic vernaculars in terms of the tectonics of the building. But I think it can be close if the
It's
details
nearly
get
there,
in there.
yeah.
Yeah, it's nearly there.
I agree. I would love the entry to be changed to be more historically significant to the neighborhood. I agree, pilaster detail needs to be added, but I think that could be done by staff. I agree with Ann's comments about putting the windows closer together, but I think that they would be nice with shutters as well, maybe a little different orientation of where they are now with some shutters. And I'm just not a fan of this stucco that we keep seeing, and I think it's just the renders. But if this home had a stucco siding and a lower roof, it would look like it's a little bit more contributing to some of the homes that are on the street that are from the 30s and 40s. And I think that's kind of the style that they're, trying to mimic here. I think the roof needs to come down. I think the hardscape will actually not even work to code because you don't have room for 2 cars, and I think 2 cars are required. And I agree with the neighbor, you're going to end up having cars on the street. So there's no historical, or significance to that curb cut. So I think they could either go to a 20 or 2 10s. Typically on a 50-foot lot, I like to see 2 10s split on either side of the lot with 3-foot setbacks. It just separates the cars, gives some nice landscaping in between. I just recommend that this just be deferred 1 more month with some of the recommendations we're making. I think there's too much for staff, and I'd like to see it come back.
I agree. I was writing down all the conditions that we've discussed this far, and we haven't even heard from the rest of the board. And I think it's too much to put on staff in terms of making sure that it's in compliance.
Yeah, I don't want to pile on, but that front entry is the key to the whole project. It's pretty bad. And the idea and the heart is in the right place, that you want a covered area while you're bringing groceries in or fumbling for your keys and protection from the shelter, but it is proportioned so incorrectly and configured so prison-like with the enclosed nature. It needs a real rework that I don't think is just as simple as opening the sides.
Agree.
And that's the key to the project. It's a 50-foot wide lot. You minus out the two side setbacks, you're left with 20-something feet, 28 feet. A facade that is the key to making it a really cute, charming one-story house. And I think the idea of the shutters or something to those front windows, I think staff mentioned combining them or pairing them. But I think the real focus needs to be finding a covered porch entry that's on site in the immediate area and kind of just cheating and copying it. But the size of the roof needs to come down and maybe change. It really needs to be really reworked, that front entry.
And I don't
And
see
I agree that it should come back to see it.
Agreed, James. I also don't see a height for the first floor, but if you compare the first floor height to the streetscape, I almost think it would be nice for whoever's going to buy this or move into this to have a higher ceiling height for that first floor, because I think the neighborhood lends itself to that. So just a recommendation to the applicant.
Okay, any further direction that we'd like to provide the applicant?
I don't know, obviously, this is not an architect-designed home, and I'm not sure if, we're putting too much here on the contractor. I would say that we would not be overburdening staff if they could come up with a lot of these things and work with him and direct him very closely. If staff is agreeable, I think that they could do well to help in the redesign and make it acceptable to the board.
I mean, I think I understand certainly the direction that's being given, so whatever the decision is, happy to work with the applicant or
Okay, with that, would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to defer. Is 1 month okay for the applicant, or do you need 2 months? 2 months? I don't know what that date is.
September 26th.
September 26th.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the contractor for being such an agreeable person.
Our next case is case numbers 2341 and 2344, 204 Valencia Road.
All set? Do we want to wait for Kristen, or are we okay to go?
Yes, you're okay.
Okay,
to go.
good. Michael Perry for the record, representing Whitney Bauer and Lee O'Donnell at 204 Valencia Road. This house was built in 1936 by C.J. Warren for George and Ruth Mann in the Monterey style, as you all know. I'm just going to go to the existing site plan here on the corner of Valencia and Medina Way. It's a modest two-story home, built again, like I said, in the Monterey style. Wonderful details with the clapboard siding, the cantilever balcony, which are typical on the gable ends. I'm going to go to just sort of the site location map here with the surrounding properties. Photographs of neighbors on Valencia. More on Valencia as well. Up and down the street. Mixture of styles of the homes. Subject property is on the bottom at 204 Valencia, as you see. Medina Way, homes to our east and further to the south. Or Medina Here's the subject property again. Like I said, here's some pictures from the front. You can see it sits on that corner, sits high up. There's a coral rock wall that brings the landscape up in front, which is very nice. So the house sits up high, has a nice high elevation. The typical cantilever balcony of the Monterey style over the entry. There was a one-story garage in the beginning, which has been modified off to the west here, sort of focusing some of our renovations in that area. The rear of the property, a small Florida room off the back with a second-story balcony. And then there's an existing covered awning here that is behind off the dining room bay window, which is hard to see. It's in the lower left-hand corner photograph here. So we focused, going back to the site plan, we focused our thoughts on this property really not wanting to affect the street elevation with any kind of addition, nothing in the two-story range that could be visible from Valencia. A few of the windows and doors that I'll get to were modified, so we wanted to fix those. So we looked at our client's program and wanted to keep everything as a one-story addition. You talked earlier about that, Amanda, where doing two-story. I think that was really what we wanted to stay away from. So we focused on coming off of that, what used to be the garage, and adding kitchen, family room, and program for a master suite, because there's bedrooms upstairs that are a little smaller, and then took advantage of looking at maybe a one-story accessory structure, since the garage is not gone, doing a cabana and sort of garage storage that faces Medina, and opening up the property with a new pool, sort of centered off the one-story addition, taking advantage of the south and east exposures as much as possible. So there's just sort of our map. I'm going to go to the floor plans really quick. So here's the existing floor plan. Again, this was the area of the garage, which had a step down, had to have a little sort of covered porch in the beginning. Second floor, as I said, with 3 bedrooms upstairs and 1 bath, and then a terrace off the rear. That's the demo plan. So what we decided to do, again, like I said, focus on the one-story addition, take that area that was the garage, turn that into a little mud laundry room entrance for them, family room here, which is off of the dining room, convert the existing kitchen into a small office area, keeping the living room, corner fireplace, the stair in the same location, the Florida room in that same location as well, going back to a kitchen and master suite. Looking at the existing property, there's a 5-foot setback. This property is just over the allowable square footage for a 5-foot setback on the side. So we maintain that 5-foot setback of the existing and then bumped in to a 7.5-foot setback, but the 10 feet is required, which does require a variance. We do have 2 neighbors to the west that supported that. I'm sure Frederic will tell you about it. So again, looking back at the floor plan, with that master addition and then creating a cabana, detached accessory structure with a little bathroom area for them, and then somewhat of a garage structure that would be for storage, to get everything off the street and not have exposed bikes and whatnot there. So that would be great, and creates a nice little courtyard feel. On the second floor, we reconfigured some areas. We took about 150 square feet of that porch, because it's quite large, and kept that shed roof area and just closed that in and to create sort of 3 little small bedrooms and bathrooms upstairs. There's the roof plan. So going to the street rendering from the corner of Valencia and Medina, looking to the southwest without the landscaping there. So again, maintaining the front of the property and just reconfiguring, making sure the windows that were adjusted were reconfigured properly. You can see the accessory structure to the rear. Here's a view from Medina. So on the front entry, and I'll go to the existing over proposed. So here, this was the window that were in what was the kitchen, and then to the right of that was another window that originally obviously was changed in the configuration here with the old garage door was. So we took the proportion of the 6/6 windows, did a double window here with the same shutters, matching for the office, same thing for the family room, and then a single entry door to the mudroom in the same style as the rest of the doors to the property. We're adding one window off of the bedroom up on the second floor, which matches the window which is on the other side of the door to that balcony. So just go in comparison. I'll go back to the renderings. So facing the south elevation, keeping that floater room, redoing French doors off, keeping the terrace, again, the railing similar as it was, the small area that we enclosed on the second floor, duplicating the 6/6 windows, maintaining the bay that's off of the dining area. And then here's our addition that goes to the south. We have two 6/6 windows in the master bedroom. Looking from the Medina, again, keeping the windows, duplicating a 6/6, a pair of French doors off of the living room. And then here you have the Florida room. And then here's our addition. Again, maintaining the rhythm of the French doors and 6/6 windows, the single hung windows, using the clapboard siding detail, duplicating gable ends that are already there. Then this is the elevation to the west. Again, existing space here that redoing with windows for the mudroom, and then off down to the kitchen, family room, and master. Here's our cabana building. A louvered garage door with a gable end facing Medina, and then French doors facing our pool, and 6/6 windows and shutters. Let's go back to the renderings really quick so you just see those in color. And I think that can conclude my architecture. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions of the applicant?
Mr. Perry, thank you for a very complete submittal.
Oh, thank you.
And you referenced it during your presentation, but I appreciate the restraint.
Well, yeah. I think that's when you look at a house like this, you don't want to affect the front of it. I mean, the windows you can fix as much as possible, right? But the addition, I've talked to Frederic about that. When I walked on the property, I knew that that's where it should go, so it doesn't affect that street. I think the variance becomes sort of something that is needed because it works with where the addition is,
Well, it's very unique that El Cid has those two streets that run north-south.
It is.
And so to preserve that view shed, I think is appreciated.
And I think it's nice to open that up to the southeast and west. You can get that sun, even with a one-story addition, you can still get the sun in that backyard. It's really going to be an amazing backyard, when they have it. They have a family with, some college-age children, so they're going to, be here all the time. And I think they're really excited about it. I think it was interesting. We were there, and a number of people passed by while we were looking at things that were asking about the home. So we're excited about it.
Great.
Well, I'm a big fan of your work, and I love what you did to what was the old garage here. It actually feels more original, and I actually like the change of the front window and the second story addition to the window. That to me looks like it's always been that way, so I appreciate your effort and your restraint here. So wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I'll agree. The massing is exactly what it needs to be, and it's such a delicate touch for, I think, what will be, it's a nice historic structure now, but what will be a really spectacular building and add even more to the historic character of the street. It does remind me of a project on Edgewood I worked on a long time ago in terms of like the fenestration that you did add. I think that the fenestration sizing is really nice. So all of these little things that add up and make a really beautiful project you've succeeded with.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have public comment after staff presentation. We'd be happy to hear from you.
Frederic Mittner, presenting both these cases jointly, 2341 for the ad valorem pre-construction and 2344 for the variance request. Normally we have those numbers in the different order, but they did submit for the ad valorem first, not realizing the setback wasn't met because the lot size is only just over by 598 square feet to require the 10-foot setback versus the 5. So this is obviously a request for 204 Valencia Road, the subject property being in the El Cid Historic District, both on the local and national registers. As you know, it's on the southwest corner of Medina Way and Valencia Road. This 1936 Monterey style home was built by C.G. Werner for George and Ruth Mann. And again, the first request is for, or the higher number is for the 2344 is for a setback request on the west side where a 10-foot minimum is required. And they are proposing, and here's a small typo here, they're actually proposing 7 foot 5 inches, not 7.5. So the variance request is actually 2 foot 7 inches. Again, it's 7 feet 5 inches, where there's 10 foot required for any lots that are greater than 10,000 square feet. And again, this particular lot is 10,598 square feet. Currently, that western setback is at 5 feet, so they are coming in further than what's already existing. The second portion of the request is for an ad valorem pre-construction application for that one-story addition at the rear and the one-story detached accessory structure. You've already seen images of the property. The front facade, the main area that's being impacted is this garage. Unfortunately, we were not able to obtain any historic photographs of exactly what that looked like. And then these kitchen windows. And then along Medina Way. The other character-defining feature that I'm excited that the applicant has retained and is showing in all the renderings is this wall, the site wall. So again, the one-story addition here on the western edge coming in 7 feet 5 inches. That is greater than the existing 5-foot current one floor. And the detached accessory structure is wonderful that they're retaining the 25-foot setback off of Medina and the existing front setback. So again, the front elevation on the north, the modifications are to these openings on the ground floor and adding another window on the second floor. Again, as I mentioned, there are no historic photographs, but the green card from 1962 does call this out as a garage. These are the other proposed modifications to the other elevations and the proposed elevations to the one-story cabana. We did review the variance standards in section 9438D6 of the Zoning and Land Development Regulations. We do believe it is compliant with all of these and meets the intent of the historic district and the zoning code, as well as the compatibility standards and the Secretary of Interior standards for the additions and modifications. So we are recommending approval of 2341 and 2344 for the request for the variance as well as the alterations to the property. Thank you. And I should note you do have 2 letters of support in your packet.
Okay, thank you. Questions of staff?
Frederick, thank you for the memo. It really illustrated the issues. Did you get any contact were you contacted by the abutting property?
Yes, that's actually one of the letters of support. The Anthonys live immediately to the west.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment. Yes, ma'am. And you can go to either podium. You can go to this one or to this one. Sure. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Catherine Carroll. I live on 217 Valencia Road. There have been 4 new houses put in the last couple of years that are still under construction. And the concern that we have isn't the design itself on the front. I think there is a light touch in terms of that. But what worries me is the cementing. What is the responsibility when you see these homes of the green space to the paving? So, for instance, a lot of the homes that we see, they have the right setbacks, but the setbacks are all brick or they're all paved. And all of those trees on the Carnes' property are now going to be ripped out. What responsibility is there for additional trees and shade?
I can
If any.
I can comment on that. So there's a hardscape and landscape code within the city. I think this property would fall under having to bring the property up to code. If there is an existing canopy, there's a mitigation. The city has the Google map views of the canopy, and as part of the condition of the permit, they will be required to keep the same canopy that currently exists. And if they can't, there's a fee that they must place for each square footage that they can't replace. But the code is actually pretty well written for landscaping and requirements, and for every 1,000 square feet minus the house footprint, they're required to have a shade tree. For every 500 square feet, they're required to have some sort of bush.
What's the fee? I'm just curious.
I don't know, but it's...
Because what we've noticed is the 4 houses that were taken out in the last 3 years, the first thing they do is rip all of the trees out.
Yeah, it's just easier for construction, and if it's not a historic tree, it's just easier for them, but they have to replace it with significant amount of canopy. I don't know what the fee is, because I usually don't have to pay it.
Ms. Mittner, do you want to respond, or? Oh, pardon?
I don't know what the cost is per tree either, but.
I mean, to the general
estimate- yes.
question.
So,
The Carnes have or 204 Valencia has a massive tree. And then one of the houses, there's 3 houses will be on construction at the same time on Medina. 2 of the other houses had an incredible amount of landscaping, and now they have none. So I'm just curious, keeping the environment of El Cid, it's like the cementing of El Cid the last 3 years. So I'm just curious to what extent it's not just hedges, but actual trees.
yes, as Mr. McLean said, there is a requirement for a landscape permit to be submitted and the minimum tree canopy to be provided. In a front yard, you need to have at least 1,000 square feet of green space, plus again, for any additional 1,000 square feet of open space, a tree, plus 500 square feet a bush. And so it is, there are minimums required. Of course, sometimes it does seem like a shock initially when you have had all this mature vegetation and the requirements may be a little less than that. And I think some of the projects you're referring to aren't quite finished yet, so maybe all their landscaping hasn't been installed yet.
I wonder if they'll take any of the bricks out to put those trees in.
I don't know the specific landscape plans on those, but there are minimum requirements.
And unfortunately, we don't have purview over landscapes on this board.
It does.
There's a really small list within the city of historic significant trees. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of invasive, non-native trees that are being removed, and I fully support that. And one of the great things about the West Palm Beach landscape requirement is that 60% of the material that goes in needs to be native or Florida friendly, so that we're really doing no harm. So I think that the city and the landscape planner have done a really good job with protecting our natural environment here, and it's only getting better. So I think for your comments, I think you should just wait and see, or...
How long to get those mature trees back with the canopy?
Well, those people, if those houses are still under construction, they can't move in until their landscaping is done. So...
Fingers crossed.
I believe the city attorney, is there anything you?
I was just going to repeat what Frederic and the board members have already said, which is that it's a permit requirement to meet the landscape code, and this board does not have purview over that, but if, you can always contact sustainability or, you know, planning and ask about,
I mean, with all the climate change going on, it's harsh to see so many houses in our neighborhood that have, you know, all their trees are just gone. So that was my comment. And not necessarily to the design aspect, but to the, you know, to what extent are we responsible for maintaining the greenery of El Cid?
Well, one thing I'll just comment on, since the garage is gone, that driveway, so the hardscape, the cementing area, that's gonna be gone.
You have a circular that goes right through what's existing grass.
Right, but there's more landscaping going in all over that property, and I'm happy to share
The quality
that.
of landscaping can be discussed, like, is Clusia really considered, you know, quality landscaping?
Well, again, the renderings are showing landscaping for what
Yeah.
it is. Also, it
And-
has to be Calusia to meet, I mean, we're not gonna put in ficus, so there's.
and that's not really in the purview of this board.
Yes. And I think that maybe you could speak to each other outside of
That's
this
what I was just gonna
meeting
say. I'm
and
happy to
provide
share
additional
any
information.
and totally
I'm
share that.
sure the people moving into the house want to be good neighbors. So perhaps you can connect outside of the meeting.
I will do, that's what I was gonna say. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go into executive session.
Well, as a regulator of the zoning code for my professional career, zoning, the zoning requirements that you see that they're seeking relief from are something kind of that irritate me. I refer to it as kind of punitive zoning regulations that a group of planners kind of think about a historical plat of an area and they come up with a number, 10,000 square feet, and once you go over that, you have to double the side setback. Not realizing that such doubling of a setback contributes to the disassembling of a streetscape and the rhythm and the pattern. And where the normal context may be at a lesser setback, and yet the applicants are forced to demonstrate hardship or some other justification for the criteria. So I personally and professionally am fully supportive of the variance as proposed. And in terms of the addition, I think, you know, particularly on the heels of some previous examples that we've seen, previous projects that we've seen tonight, this is the perfect compatible, sensitive addition that we've seen. I support
Absolutely.
the application entirely.
100% agree with everything you just said. I would approve this in a second.
And how wonderful that we have the purview to approve the variance.
And Ms. Mittner, we need two motions, one for the variance and one for the COA. Okay. I'll go ahead and make a motion. I move that the Historic Preservation Board approve application number, I believe this one is 23-44, for alterations and additions in accordance with standards 9 and 10 as set forth in section 94-49 of the city zoning and land development regulations. This is 41 and the variance is 44. Okay, so the variance verbiage is incorrect then? Because on the granting of the variance, it says it's, okay.
Just to
41.
be clear, so it's 2344 is the variance, okay.
Okay. So this is 23-41. Okay. The motion is based on the testimony presented along with the application submitted and the staff report, which constitutes competent substantial evidence.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I move that the Historic Preservation Board grant application number 23-44. A request by Michael Perry on behalf of 204 Valencia Road LLC for a variance from section 94-82B2 of the zoning and land development regulations, which requires a primary structure on a lot greater than 10,000 square feet to have a 10-foot minimum side setback in the historic single-family high-density SF14C3 residential zoning district at 204 Valencia Road. The applicant is requesting a 7-foot 5-inch, correct? Okay. Side setback, thus granting a 2-foot 7-inch side setback variance. The motion is based upon the testimony presented along with the application submitted in the staff report, which constitutes competent substantial evidence. The Historic Preservation Board hereby makes finding of fact that each of the 10 criteria in Article 2, Section 94-38D6 have been met for the variance.
Do you have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Case approved. Thank you. Our final case of the evening is 23-42, 3316 Greenwood Avenue.
Thank you so much. Okay, I did it quickly. I did a quick PowerPoint very quickly, okay? My name is Francisco Semperio. I'm representing the FS Engineering Design with the Atlantic Engineering. My project is for 3316 Greenwood Avenue. We're proposing a one-story.
Can you speak into the mic?
Could you finish your conversation outside of the chambers, please?
Oh, my bad.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. I'm proposing a one-story single-family home in a historic district, and my comment is the architectural characteristic doesn't fall under it. The main issue is the roof that I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to achieve a hip roof in a historic community. So, as you can see, this is the site plan, and there's no garage, but the driveway is 20 feet wide to fit 2 cars. Let's go on to the next plan. It's a 3-bedroom house with an office space and a kitchen and a living room. And then there's curb patio in the back. As you can see, the whole design is based on a hip roof that I'm trying to maintain if possible. I've reviewed it with Ann Hamilton beforehand, and over in the master bathroom area, as you can see, there's a master bedroom and master bath area on the right side. I had a fixed window, and then the entryway, it was squared off. We revised to make it more appearance for the community. And then I also had asphalt shingles. I changed it to a tile roof to see if it approves. And then here's the rear of it. So this is the whole area footage of 3316 Greenwood. And I've also provided a historic preservation plan for each house, designated in the 500 feet clearance around the house. So you'd see, starting from the bottom, you'd see 3232 Greenwood, you'd see 3226 Greenwood, 3302 Greenwood, 3306 Greenwood, and 3310 Greenwood. And then 3316 Greenwood is in the middle. And then on the left-hand side, following more north, you would see 3318 Greenwood, 3402 Greenwood, and 3406 Greenwood, and 3412 Greenwood, and 3416 Greenwood. As you can tell, most of these houses are all parapet walls. A couple have a few gable houses. The only one that's very noticeable to have a gable house is 3302 and 3236. They appear to have a larger pitch, and they have gable roofs. Okay, this is for 3232. They have a parapet, and in front they have like a small little gable roof. For 3236 Greenwood, they have a gable roof. In 3302, they're still building it, and they have a gable roof in front with a covered entry in the front. And then 3306 Greenwood is my favorite. They have a very nice parapet wall with a gable roof in the front for a covered entry. And then 3310 Greenwood is a 2-story with parapet walls. And 3316 Greenwood is the property that we'll we'll be working on, and I'm hoping to put a hip roof. We have 3316 Greenwood, and then we have 3318 Greenwood. It's another parapet with a gable, and then 3402 is a parapet with a gable as well. 3406 and 3412 and 3416 are all parapets with, yeah, they're all parapets mostly. The only other hip roof is across the street. As you can tell, it's on this side of the aerial view. I drew it in red really quickly to highlight it, and it's 3415 Greenwood, and it's a hip roof. There's also on, like, if you keep driving a little bit more down, there's 3617 East View Avenue, which is a hip roof. So what I'm trying to obtain in perspective is a hip roof. And I really want an overhang because I used to work at a truss company and I used to design all the roofs, and I do all the plans, I do all the blueprints and everything. I work for an engineer. But beforehand, I used to work at a truss company, and when we designed all these roofs, I was a firm believer in it's like a hat. It protects the wind, it'll protect the rain from falling under the wall paint. It'll protect the windows. It'll protect the SHGC factor for the mechanical aspects. It just helps the house more efficiently. And if possible, if you guys do want a flat roof, I would if the board deems it a flat roof, if possible, I would like to still keep an overhang. And I also came up with a conceptual design if possible. And that is basically my PowerPoint. Thank you so much. That is my presentation.
Questions of the applicant?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the streetscapes. It's very telling.
I really wish I would have showed, I really want to show you guys all the plans, the soil report, all the power rules, but I couldn't. Super sorry about that.
But if you could stay up, I think we have some questions of you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm allowed to stay up. Oh, not bad.
Thanks. No, I was just saying thank you very much for the walking tour of the immediate area. We don't see that a lot from the applicants.
I also wanted to show the Google Earth view really badly, but I couldn't.
No.
Had it all prepared. I was.
It's great. But I think you did a really successful job in kind of a argument of why a hip roof doesn't belong in the immediate area, which I know is not what your motivation was for that presentation. Because it seems as though even your personal favorite was 3306, that has that front
Yeah, I had a parapet.
And that front covered entry. But similar to an application that we heard twice earlier on the agenda that had a problem with the front entrance entry, I think this project is also suffering from that. And unlike that one, this one has even more urban context and covered entries that you could kind of borrow from. So I think that at minimum, you're probably going to have to do a restudy of the that front entrance area, similar to that the gentleman that was here again two applications ago on 32nd Street. And you know, just I appreciate where you're coming from in terms of your history, but it really does kind of, for me, tell me that. And even I think your opening introduction was the hip roof was my decision maker in this project.
Yeah,
and that to me, as a designer or someone that used to be a designer, that the roof should be kind of the ending culmination of the.
Oh no! The only reason why I mentioned the roof is because that's the final comment I need for the city. I already have all the comments approved from the city already.
All the comments, okay.
Yeah.
From your, okay.
Ann Hamilton, the main comment she had for me was the roof.
Right.
That's why I mentioned the roof, so
So if we're going to pursue the roof, I think 3302 is a better example of how you could begin to succeed in your front entrance. Thank you.
Okay. Oh,
You can ask a question.
Would you like to see a gable roof instead of a hip? Is that what I'm hearing? Or?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I just don't know where to start here. I'm sorry. Just, I have read the staff recommendations and I can't get beyond that because I agree with staff 100%. I don't think this design lends itself to the streetscape, which is why I love the streetscape because it really does stand out. Even though 3302 Greenwood is to me a little dramatically different than everything else, I think that there's so much significance to these Spanish missions and Mediterraneans that I think that I would like to see a complete architectural change from fenestration to roof to the full design. So I just think that this is, and this is probably more executive session here, but would you be willing to look at your design and?
No, I'm willing to change all aspects of design to meet the standards.
Because I think
I will actually change the covered entry to have it more of 3306, like a bigger entry, and I'll shorten the master bedroom and make a longer entryway.
Yeah, I agree with you. Out of all the streetscapes, that's one of my favorite. And if you design something that's similar to 3306, even though their fenestration isn't probably historic, I think you'd be going in the right direction.
A covered entry is no problem. That's easy to change. I don't mind moving things around.
But I like the parapet, everything that's about 3306.
Okay, so
you can't do.
I'm really trying to avoid a parapet just because I don't want to have any scuppers. I don't want to have the parapet wall. I just believe that the water should run off the roof immediately, not stay on the roof.
It usually does with the parapet. I live in a 100-year-old home and it goes.
Yeah, I just wanted it to run off immediately, Yeah.
So
that's why I was trying to just lean towards a hip roof if possible. Gables are still nice. But now you have to do when you design the gable, you design it with the gable reinforcements all CBS, not out of wood no more.
I would not like to see a gable.
Yes,
or
if possible.
Or a hip.
Okay, I'll change the design if I'll just keep coming back to the board if possible.
Okay.
Until approval. As many times as it takes. This isn't the only project you guys have seen me here for. I'm also my engineer's gonna be with me for the next project, 1206 Georgia Avenue. It's a 2-story. I'm gonna also be here too. So it's nice meeting all you guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Do you have?
I just want to be clear when we're having this conversation. So if it's a mission style and we're talking about 3306 Greenwood, then a parapet is appropriate for that style of home. We would not want to see that style of home with a gable roof on it. So if you're doing a gable roof, then it needs to be a vernacular structure or something similar that actually relates to that selection of roof profile. So, essentially what we're saying is you need to do a really serious precedent study based on your context.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. Mm-hmm. I don't mind revising this.
We appreciate your willingness to work with us.
No, I appreciate all you guys' comments. Thank you so much.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ann Hamilton presenting case number 23-42 for new construction at 3316 Greenwood Avenue. This is a lot along Greenwood Avenue in the Northwood Hills Historic District. As you can see, the existing site is vacant and has two structures on either side, one of which is in need of some repair. The request is for proposed new construction of a one-story single-family home of approximately 2,116 square feet. One of the problems that is identified in the staff report is that square footage is over lot coverage allowances, so the applicant in resubmitting will need to at least lower that square footage a bit. So on either side, 3318 Greenwood is a mission style, and 3310 Greenwood is a two-story. I believe it was actually a container home that was built in 2015, but it was also in the mission style. The history of the site: there was a one-story mission home that was built in 1925 on the site that was demolished in 1995. And a previous approval from 2019 was for another container-style home that was in mission styling, as you can see here. The proposed site plan is shown here. And the floor plan, as the applicant stated, it's a 3-bedroom home with an office. As you can see from the front elevation, it is proposed to be barrel tile. That is something that the applicant was agreeable to work with staff on in the hopes of getting the hip roof approved. The side elevations features horizontal sliding windows and single hung windows. The whole house has a stucco finish, and the rear has some sliding glass doors. Here's the window and door schedule and the roof plan. As previously mentioned, it is for a hip roof. And as you can see here in the context of the neighborhood, along this side of Greenwood, for the most part, it is typically these small one-story mission-style homes that are very similar. Most seem to have been built by the same builder at around the same time in roughly 1925. Here's a selection of the streetscape. As you can see, again, mostly it's those type of homes, the only exception being 3302 Greenwood, which was a recent approval. However, it was located next to a home with a gable and roof, and that was one of the justifications for that. So staff believes that it does not meet the applicable criteria, which is why we were recommending denial. However, if the board would like the applicant to come back and significantly revise the design and change it to a more appropriate style, staff is also very happy to work with the applicant on that, so as to avoid them having to pay additional fees to resubmit. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Questions of staff?
So Anne, I just want to understand when we deny or defer. So with the denial, it's a whole new application.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
They have to
so I
resubmit.
agree with your last comments about having the applicant work with the board and you. So thank you.
Do we know what approximate square footage he needs to be down to, based on lot coverage?
I did the calculations a couple days ago. I think it's 1,700, something along those lines. Yeah, so the whole square footage is. So yeah, the 35% is just for the building, not for the paving. We can work on that later.
So it's on the house square footprint.
Yes, the house footprint, yes.
It's over by 0.23.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you. I don't think we have any public comment. So we'll go into executive session. Is it crazy to say that I would just like to see the house that was demolished reconstructed?
No, that's not crazy at all.
Oh, I love that house, especially that photo they showed us.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Share that image with this young man.
Yeah.
Does he have that?
There's your project.
Simple fix.
Easy.
Yeah.
I think I live in the
What a great
same
opportunity.
house that the builder built.
Like, it's so rare that documentation exists of some of
It
these
is.
smaller properties, and
Yeah.
what a great opportunity to restore the rhythm. I mean, that's so special. I have to say, I don't know the last time I drove down that street, but it's wonderful seeing them all together.
And I don't think 3302 should be used as an example.
Yeah, that's an easy. And then once the lot coverage is pared down a little bit, some of the fenestration considerations will be addressed as well in keeping with mission-style homes. Sounds like a pretty good project, homework. Just recreate what was originally there.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe, do you need a denial to convince your client to listen to you? Or,
No, that's a real question.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Could you come back up to the podium, please?
You're right.
I needed denial to hear you guys' responses to how to
Oh.
fix and improve my drawing.
well,
So
I'm
do-
all for being fair, and to me, there
Mhm.
was some items on this agenda that I thought were, I think I said the denial word earlier, so, and on a benefit to that applicant, we let them continue. So I would kind of champion your cause to also afford you the ability to go back to your client, say, listen, you gotta listen to this meeting.
Yeah, no,
'Cause,
it's, I actually
they were
have,
very strong, and they gave me a blueprint they gave you a blueprint for success.
yeah.
But you got to get rid of this roof idea. I just don't see that being approved, and with the historical context of the immediate area.
Okay, so you don't like the hip roof, right?
You gave a great presentation on why a hip roof shouldn't be in this immediate area.
You did the opposite of what you were trying to do.
I did
to
the
it,
opposite of
so-
what I was trying to do.
And if the staff can share some of the original photos,
Mhm.
I would like to see something closer to what was originally there, which is also very similar to your favorite house.
Yeah, it's just because literally across the street, it's a hip house.
Yeah, but that's not a good example.
And then all the houses are built by the same builder. However, in between those, you have a gable house, and then you have another gable house.
The board has given you an opportunity to be a hero here in replacing the former home that was there.
Yeah.
It'd be a big plus, and it would be a big plus for your future career as well.
No, okay.
Okay? There'll be other pip roofs in the future, you know, that belong where they belong.
That's awesome.
Okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
No, the client was requesting the hip roof, so I was just trying to
Yeah.
see if possible.
So is a 2-month deferral enough, or 1 month, or you want 2 months deferral to come back here?
I think it needs to be two.
I think it needs to be
agree.
2.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be 2.
So can I make a motion
Yes.
to defer for 2 months based on tonight's comments?
And say the date certain.
So that's to the September 26th meeting.
That's
Give a
that's
second.
perfect.
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll see you in 2 months. With that, can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.